To every enemy who mistook my silence for surrender, I was sharpening. My dear chosen ones, lean in. This is not a lullaby, it's a wake-up call with knuckles on the door. Call it what it is. You aced the pop quiz nobody warned you about, and now the locks are about to recognize your fingerprints. You weren't walking hallways for nothing. While others begged for shortcuts, you were tracked by pressure sensors, delayed calls, quiet rooms, and critics with unlimited data plans. Life didn't hand you a syllabus, it hurled weather. And if you made it through without becoming a knockoff of yourself, that's not luck, that's proof. I know what's whispering in your head right now. Was I being punished? Number. You were being measured. Not for talent, for truth. But I broke down. Doesn't that mean I failed? Breakdown isn't failure. It's data. The grade isn't a snapshot. It's a trend line. When the storm pressed, did you sell out or did you hold the line? How do I know I passed? Because bitterness tried to recruit you and you declined. Because retaliation begged for your hands and you kept them clean. Because the room got darker and you still chose to see. Listen, chosen ones, the test was designed to be felt, not announced. It looked like being overlooked, misread, excluded from tables where mediocrity was the menu. It looked like doors that wouldn't budge when you were certain you'd earned the hinge. That wasn't neglect, that was calibration. Pressure wasn't there to break your bones. It was there to tune your backbone. Quote this to yourself when doubt knocks. I don't chase rooms. I raise my frequency until rooms chase me. You ask, why keep it so quiet? Because authenticity hates an audience. The moment we know we're being graded, we perform. Life wanted your reflex, not your routine. It watched what you did when receipts weren't being saved. When applause wasn't on standby, when your name was safest in your own mouth, you didn't go cold to survive the cold. That's the difference. Anyone can roar, not everyone can stay uncontaminated. And yes, the enemy got loud. Smiles turned sideways. Support became surveillance. Offers came wrapped like blessings but tasted like compromise. You felt the bait, attention with strings, money with a mask. Opportunities that demanded you shrink to fit. Chosen ones, you didn't nibble. You let shiny traps pass because your future doesn't negotiate with discounts. Say it with me. If it costs my core, it's counterfeit. That line will save you years. Here's the gut punch they won't see coming. Pain didn't make you smaller. It made you precise. You learned to hear your inner signal in a stadium of noise. You learned the difference between hunger and desperation, between a door and a detour. You learned that tears are not weakness, but wet ink, signatures on the contract you wrote with your own resilience. And every time your knees buckled but your values didn't, life took notes, not to punish, to confirm. So let's speak plainly, chosen ones. You were not ignored, you were audited. You were not benched, you were benched marked. While you were asking for an opening, you became the opening. That is the idiomatic headline of this chapter. You passed the secret exam in the dark, and now daylight owes you entry. The reward isn't a trophy, it's recognition. Rooms that once felt allergic to you will start clearing their throats. Not because you learned a new trick, but because you refuse to unlearn yourself. Will the enemy be mad? Absolutely. Let them be allergic to your upgrade. Quote this and move on. You threw dirt, I built roots. When the highlight reels roll for others, remember, velvet ropes are nothing to someone who's already the invitation. Stay with me, chosen ones. By the end of this, you won't just name what you survived. You'll understand why the quiet grind had to come before the loud opening, and why the next doors aren't doors at all. They're acknowledgements. And listen closely, chosen ones. This isn't just another video you scroll past. You've already passed a secret exam most people didn't even know they were sitting for, and that's why these life-changing doors are about to swing open for you. If you know deep down this message is hitting your story word for word, show it. Drop a 77 in the comments so I know my real chosen ones are here. Hit that like, lock in with subscribe, and stay till the very end, because only those who've been tested in silence will recognize the signs I'm about to reveal. Ordinary eyes won't see it, but you will. Now lean in. Let's break it down step by step, and I promise, by the time we're done, you'll know exactly why your private struggle was the key to your public breakthrough. Number 1. Character was the currency, credentials meant nothing. When the spotlight fades, character is the only currency that spends. You thought my silence was weakness, but silence was my weapon. While you bragged about your resume, life was testing my receipts. My dear chosen ones, let me speak straight to you. This isn't about the trophies you stacked, the numbers you chased, or the followers that double-tapped your highlight reel. This was never about credentials. Life doesn't measure you in diplomas or dollar signs. It measures you in the grit you carry when nobody's clapping. And here's the part that slices the enemy wide open. While they were performing for applause, you were being watched in the shadows where applause never reaches. That's the battlefield they'll never understand. Chosen ones, you ask, why was I overlooked? Why did betrayal come from the very people I would have defended? Because that was the exam paper in disguise. The real test didn't come in the form of questions you could study for. It came through betrayals you didn't see coming, through lies told by voices you trusted, through nights that broke you down, and mornings that mocked your effort. It wasn't unfairness, it was filtration. Life was stripping away the fake to reveal what could not be purchased, your core. Think about it. Anyone can stand tall when the lights are bright. Anyone can play hero when the world is watching. But the chosen ones, you, were judged in silence. You were being weighed in the invisible moments when the room was empty and your knees wanted to buckle. And the enemy hated it because every time pain tried to make you bitter, you chose better. Every time you had the chance to retaliate, you stayed restrained. Every time you could have become a mirror of their cruelty, you refused. That's what set you apart. Here's the metaphor. Life is a poker table. Most players are flashing their chips, bluffing with borrowed confidence. But you were sitting quiet, letting your restraint speak. That's why the game is shifting in your favor. The enemy expected you to fold, but you didn't. You held on, not because it was easy, but because you refused to let their chaos rewire your DNA. Some of you are still asking, but how do I know I passed? Let me answer. Because you had every reason to turn cold, and you didn't. Because cruelty surrounded you, and you stayed kind. Because your silence in the middle of slander screamed louder than their lies. That is how you know. Your character was being recorded in places no resume could reach, and the record is stamped. Authentic. Chosen ones, hear me. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who stayed pure after walking through filth. That's you. You weren't promoted because of knowledge. You weren't elevated because of performance. You rose because life saw what couldn't be faked. Your restraint became your roar. Your patience became your proof. And the enemy will choke on this truth. Credentials impress crowds, but character unlocks doors. And now, doors are swinging open not because you chased them, but because you became the kind of person they were built to welcome. Number 2. The exam you never knew you were taking, the exam that disguised itself as chaos. They thought the confusion would break me, but confusion became my classroom. Chosen ones, listen carefully. You didn't even know you were in an exam. That's what made it the hardest test you'll ever face. If life had announced it up front, here comes your trial, get ready, you would have braced yourself, dressed your wounds in performance, and played the part of perfection. But that's not how this works. This wasn't about how well you could pretend. It was about who you really are when pretending isn't an option. The exam was designed to be felt, not announced. That's why it came disguised as chaos. It looked like confusion when nothing was adding up. It looked like silence when every answer you begged for stayed locked away. It looked like doors slamming in your face right after you knocked with all your strength. It looked like the very people you trusted flipping into strangers overnight. And in those moments, the enemy whispered, "You're being punished. You're overlooked. You don't matter." But my dear chosen ones, that wasn't punishment. It was proof. You ask, then why did it hurt so bad? Why did I feel abandoned? Because the only way to reveal your rawest strength was to strip away the script. Life had to corner you in places where no performance could survive. That's where your true reflexes came out. The anger, the disappointment, the doubt. Yes, all of that counted. Not because you were expected to be flawless, but because the test was watching for authenticity. Were you real enough to admit the pain, but still not betray your own essence? Were you exhausted, but still willing to crawl forward instead of surrendering your identity? That's what the silence was measuring. Think of it like this. It wasn't a pop quiz in a classroom. It was life itself. The exam was hidden in your bills when the money ran dry. It was in your relationships when loyalty flipped to betrayal. It was in your own reflection when getting out of bed felt like dragging a mountain. That's where you were being graded, not on whether you smiled through it all, but on whether the fire turned you fake, or if you stayed real when everything around you screamed, "Give up." And chosen ones, you passed, not by acing a written test, not by impressing a crowd, but by refusing to let storms rewrite your DNA. You stayed true in a setting designed to break you. That was the exam, and you didn't just pass. You aced it without even knowing you were in the room. Number 3. Pressure. Tried to rewrite you, but you refused to fold. They wanted me to shapeshift into something unrecognizable, but I chose to bleed truth rather than live as a counterfeit. Chosen ones, lean in. This was never about whether you could lift the heaviest weight, spit the sharpest words, or look the strongest in the spotlight. The test went deeper. It came at you quietly, layer by layer, moment by moment, asking a single question. Would you trade who you really are just to make survival easier? That's where most people break. They give in, little by little, not because they're evil, but because pain convinces them that softness is weakness, that honesty is a liability, that love is a losing strategy. But you, my chosen ones, you didn't fold. The pressure was real. Betrayal that should have frozen you. Loss that should have hollowed you out. Toxic relationships that tried to poison your belief in goodness itself. The world whispered in your ear, "Drop your empathy, it's too expensive. Drop your honesty, it's too risky. Drop your softness, it's too painful." And still you didn't. You stayed soft in a system that thrives on hardness. You kept your empathy in a world that pays apathy with applause. You remained authentic when masks would have gotten you invited into rooms faster. That's why you passed. Let's be real, this wasn't an easy exam. Every part of it was designed to tempt you into becoming a bootleg version of yourself. That's how the enemy works. The goal was never to end you. It was to bend you, to twist you into someone unrecognizable, to make you abandon your blueprint so that even when doors opened, the person walking through wouldn't even be you anymore. But you didn't let survival morph you into a stranger. You held your line. You stayed rooted, even when the cost was friends, opportunities, or the illusion of peace. Chosen ones, this is the part they'll never get. Staying authentic when everything pushes you to fake it is a kind of warfare. And you won that war without even realizing it. You proved that being real in a world of replicas is the rarest form of power. You proved that losing things while keeping yourself intact is not loss, it's strategy. The ordinary conform, the chosen endure. And that endurance has set you apart. Remember this, the doors opening for you now are not opening because you played the game better. They're opening because you refused to play it at all. You passed the secret exam by keeping your blueprint intact, and that authenticity is the master key. And when you step through, you'll realize the real win was never fitting in. The real win was standing out without selling out. Number 4. Purity under pressure outweighed loud strength. Pressure didn't break you, it proved you were untouchable. You wanted me bitter, but I came out brighter. You tried to twist me, but I sharpened instead. My dear chosen ones, lean in. The world claps for a kind of strength that's flashy. Loud comebacks, public revenge, exposing secrets, dragging names through the dirt. That's the strength the crowd understands. But what life tested in you wasn't how hard you could swing back. It wasn't about revenge at all. It was about purity under pressure. Could you walk through betrayal without letting it stain you? Could you move through chaos without becoming chaos yourself? That was the exam, and you, chosen one, passed. You see, strength is easy when it's loud. Anyone can clap back. Anyone can spit venom when venom is thrown at them. But the real test was quieter, deeper. Could you stay soft in a world that pushed you to harden? Could you stay clean in systems designed to dirty you? Could you still love in environments that wanted to turn you into stone? That's what was being measured. And don't get it twisted. The enemy wasn't aiming just to hurt you. The plan was to corrupt you, to stain your character and leave you unrecognizable to yourself. Pain will always offer you excuses. Get cold, get selfish, stop trusting, stop caring. And honestly, nobody would have blamed you if you did. But you didn't. Every time bitterness knocked, you locked the door. Every time anger begged for the driver's seat, you kept your hands steady. That's not weakness. That's a different league of strength, the kind that most people never master. Chosen ones, think about it like this. Anyone can survive a fire by coming out hardened like steel. But only the rarest can step out of the same flames and keep their humanity intact. That's what you did. You didn't let betrayal turn you into a mirror of the betrayer. You didn't let disappointment convert you into cynicism. You didn't let pain sculpt you into poison. And that restraint, that decision to remain authentic, is why doors are opening for you now. Life wasn't watching how many punches you could take. It was watching what you became after the punches landed. You didn't just prove you're strong. You proved you're unshakable. You're refined. You're untouchable in the one way that matters most, the purity of your core. So, chosen ones, wear this truth with pride. The exam wasn't about surviving. It was about surviving without contamination. And while others let pressure twist them into something ugly, you came out glowing. That glow, that's your evidence. That glow, that's your key. And now the doors ahead can't stay shut, not against someone who stayed pure when pressure tried to break them. Number 5. Life was watching when no one else was looking. The silent cameras were always rolling, and you were the proof they wanted. The enemy thought my pain was private. It wasn't. It was televised in realms they'll never access. My chosen ones, let me put this bluntly, your suffering was never just a personal struggle. What felt like isolation was surveillance. What felt like random chaos was a witness check across layers you couldn't even see. While you thought you were drowning in silence, life was broadcasting your reactions to arenas far bigger than this one. You weren't just surviving, you were auditioning for a role most people can't even imagine. Here's what the enemy doesn't want you to realize. Every time you resisted the bait, every time you stayed calm when slander begged for your outrage, every time you chose truth over the easy lie, it was logged. Not on paper, not on social media receipts, but in a record so high up, it makes the enemy choke. That's why your pain carried weight. That's why it felt heavier than it should have. Because it wasn't just about this world, it was about dimensions where integrity is currency. And I hear your questions, but why did it have to be me? Why did it feel like my pain mattered more than others? Because you're chosen, and chosen ones don't get graded on comfort. They get graded on credibility. The credibility to carry influence without corruption. The credibility to lead without losing yourself. Anyone can look strong in public, but only a rare few can stay clean when no spotlight is watching. That's the real test. Think of it like this. Life was running a stress test on your spirit, the same way engineers push a bridge to its limits before anyone drives across it. If it can't hold weight, it collapses. But you didn't collapse. Yes, you bent. Yes, you cracked in private moments. But you didn't break into something unrecognizable. You held, and the unseen world took notes. Chosen ones, understand this. Your reactions weren't just emotions. They were evidence. Evidence that you can be trusted with more. Evidence that you won't sell out for applause. Evidence that power won't turn you into the very thing you fought against. That's why what's coming next is so loud, so undeniable, so life-changing. Because the cameras caught you in raw form, and you proved yourself worthy when no one thought you were even being tested. So here's the truth the enemy can't stand. You didn't just pass. You passed in silence, under surveillance, with no applause. And now, the doors are about to open. Not just because of what you endured, but because of who you remained while enduring. This is the moment the record goes public. Number 6. Counterfeit opportunities tested your loyalty to yourself. The counterfeit was the bait, but you refused to bite. Not every door is an invitation. Some are traps painted gold. Chosen ones lean in. This exam wasn't about dodging obvious darkness. It was about standing tall when temptation came dressed as opportunity. See, most people think the only test is pain. But when you're truly chosen, the subtler exam arrives in disguise, counterfeit blessings, things that look good, sound perfect, and have everyone around you clapping. But underneath, they are designed to dilute you. Think back. The relationship that looked like love but demanded you trade in your values piece by piece. The promotion that came with more money but less of your essence, where you had to shrink your truth to fit in. The breakthrough that required you to silence your instincts just to keep pace with the crowd. That was bait. Chosen ones. Polished bait. And the scariest part, it didn't look like a trap. It looked like destiny knocking. You may have asked yourself, why did it feel so close to right but still sit wrong in my gut? That was the exam. The test wasn't, can you endure pain? You already proved that. The test was, can you resist counterfeit comfort? Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't failure. It's settling too early for something that isn't aligned with your true blueprint. And while everyone else was sprinting toward the flash, while friends and family shouted, "This is your moment," you hesitated, you paused, you let it pass, and they called you crazy, ungrateful, blind. But in reality, you were tuned in. You knew that if it forced you to betray your core, it wasn't your reward. It was your reroute. That's what separates chosen ones from the crowd. Ordinary people chase applause. Chosen ones chase alignment. Ordinary people settle for fast success. Chosen ones wait for authentic elevation. You chose your essence over exposure, your integrity over influence, your truth over temporary validation. That restraint, that's rare. That's what proves you've passed. Let me be clear. Saying no to obvious evil doesn't make you powerful. Saying no to a counterfeit blessing that looks like everything you thought you wanted, that's where the real strength shows. And because you didn't sell out, because you refused to twist yourself into a shape that didn't belong to you, life is about to reward you with doors that no counterfeit can imitate. So let the enemy choke on this truth. You cannot be bought with glitter because you were built for gold. The test is over, chosen ones. and your loyalty to yourself just unlocked the kind of elevation that doesn't come with strings attached. Number 7. Your tears became the receipts of survival. Your tears were receipts, not ruin. They called my tears weakness. What they didn't know is every drop was proof I kept standing when life tried to bury me. Chosen ones, let's talk straight. Your tears weren't breakdowns to be ashamed of. They were battle reports, each one a line of evidence stamped with your endurance. While the world claps for loud wins, life was collecting your silent nights, the ones where you held it together all day only to collapse when nobody was watching. That collapse, it wasn't failure, it was data. It was the exam marker that proved you hadn't turned bitter even when you had every reason to. You've got to understand this. Suffering wasn't just pain, it was ink, and you, chosen ones, wrote essays with it. Not essays of defeat, but essays of survival, resilience, authenticity. Think about it. Anyone can smile in public, but what you did in private told the real story. Those moments where words couldn't capture the ache, where your chest was heavy but your spirit still refused to rot. That was the exam. And guess what? You passed. Some of you wonder, but didn't my tears show weakness? Didn't they prove I was broken? Number. They proved you were human without becoming hardened. They showed that despite being pushed to your limits, you didn't trade empathy for apathy or compassion for coldness. Every tear was a testimony that said, "This hurts, but it won't change who I am." That's not weakness. That's unmatched power. Chosen ones, the enemy wanted those tears to drown you. Instead, they watered your roots. While others mocked, underestimated, or misunderstood you, your tears told the truth life was trying to hide. You cared, you loved, you invested, and you refused to turn stone-hearted. And that is exactly why you stand out. Because in a world that rewards numbness, you dared to feel. Here's the twist. Those tears you thought nobody saw, they're the receipts that life kept. Proof that while everything tried to twist you into someone unrecognizable, you didn't fold, you didn't lash out, you didn't morph into the villain they wanted you to become. You stayed you, and when the dust settles, that's what will make doors swing open, because doors aren't looking for the loudest, they're looking for the most authentic. So hear this, you didn't just survive, you cried your way into elevation, you wept your way into credibility, you signed your name in pain, and the record now shows, chosen, tested, proven, and those tears, they were never waste. They were receipts, the undeniable proof that the secret exam has already been passed, and the next chapter is waiting with doors wide open. Number 8. Isolation. Wasn't emptiness. It was your private throne room of transformation. My dear chosen one, listen closely, because what you called isolation was never abandonment, punishment, or cosmic oversight. It was a divine summons into a private throne room built for your transformation, a chamber so sacred that no counterfeit soul and no jealous spirit was permitted to enter, a place where God stripped away the noise, severed the parasites, muted the crowds, and sat you in the furnace of solitude so you could finally hear your own anointing echo without interruption. And yes, it felt empty, it felt cold. It felt like you had been exiled to the very edges of existence, but that's only because you mistook the construction zone for a coffin, when in truth it was the birthplace of your becoming. Isolation wasn't silence, it was strategy. You were pulled away because what God needed to deposit in you could not be forged in rooms polluted by envy, small-mindedness, and people who clapped for a version of you that was too dim, too diluted, too humble, too reduced to carry the magnitude of what's coming. They weren't pushing you out, you were being pulled up. They weren't ignoring you, He was insulating you. You weren't forgotten, you were being formatted for spiritual royalty, and chosen ones don't graduate in crowds, they ascend in chambers carved out by the divine. Think about it. Every major shift in your life happened when you were alone, when the phone stopped ringing, when support evaporated overnight, when familiar faces felt foreign, when you tried to explain your heart, but nobody had the bandwidth to understand the depth of your calling. That was not life punishing you. That was heaven protecting the upgrade. Because the old circle couldn't house the new glory. The old environment couldn't survive the frequency you were rising into. The old relationships would have infected your destiny with doubt, jealousy, comparison, and limitations disguised as advice. So God quarantined you, not because you were weak, but because you were becoming powerful. Not because you were worthless, but because you were being refined into someone priceless. Isolation was a vault, chosen one. A vault where God hid you while he rewrote your identity, healed your fractures, sharpened your intuition, stretched your capacity, and upgraded your spirit for arenas that require authenticity, not performance. And yes, it hurt. Every chosen one knows the sting of divine separation. The nights where you cried out for someone, anyone, to just sit with you in the dark. The mornings where your chest felt hollow because the people you gave everything to suddenly evaporated. The days where you wondered if something was wrong with you, when in truth something was right with you. So right that you could no longer fit inside the emotional cages you once called connection. Isolation wasn't a punishment. It was a promotion that didn't look like one. The throne room doesn't come with confetti. It comes with questions. Why me? Why now? Why alone? But chosen ones are never alone. They're simply escorted into rooms the unprepared cannot enter. While you thought the universe was stripping things away, it was actually stripping you down to the blueprint, down to the core, down to the parts of you that were still pure enough to be used for greatness. Because noise would have distracted you, crowds would have diluted you, validation would have seduced you, comfort would have deactivated you. So God shut every door and pulled every voice away until the only sound left was your own breath and his instruction. That's when the transformation began. That's when you started hearing truth instead of ego, intuition instead of insecurity, purpose instead of pressure. Isolation forced you to meet the version of yourself you had avoided, neglected, or drowned beneath the demands of people who needed your energy but never offered their own. And in that throne room of transformation, you discovered you weren't broken, you were being rebuilt. You weren't unlovable, you were being upgraded. You weren't lost, you were being redirected toward a destiny too heavy for those who abandoned you to carry. They couldn't come, not because they were evil, but because they were too small for the size of the journey ahead. They were temporary characters in a permanent calling, and chosen ones. When God isolates you, it is never to reduce you, it is to reveal you, to show you your real strength, your real voice, your real identity, the power that was always buried beneath responsibility, noise, trauma, and expectation. You walked into isolation feeling like a question mark, but you're walking out like an exclamation point. That's why the next doors are opening, not because you performed, but because you transformed, because you survived the silence without losing your soul, because you endured emptiness without becoming empty, because instead of letting loneliness twist you, you let it teach you. That is the evidence of a chosen one. That is the proof you passed the secret exam. The world thinks isolation crushes people. They don't know it's where God crowns his own. Number 9. Your patience was the silent sniper that took out every trap set against you. My dear chosen one, lean in, because this chapter is not just truth, it's revelation, and it's going to hit your spirit like thunder on dry ground. You've been wondering why things moved so slowly for you, why every step forward felt like wading through invisible mud while others sprinted on smooth pavement. You questioned if God forgot you, if destiny got delayed, if you somehow missed your timing. But hear me clearly, your patience wasn't a weakness, it was your weapon. It was the silent sniper perched in the unseen realms, taking out traps, illusions, false opportunities, and enemies you didn't even know were studying you. While people mocked your pace and mistook your stillness for stagnation, heaven knew the truth. You weren't slow, you were strategic. You weren't behind, you were being protected. You weren't paused, you were being positioned. And the patience you hated having to practice was the very force that dismantled every setup crafted to derail your calling. Chosen ones, you need to understand the depth of what patience really meant for you. Patience wasn't sitting quietly. It wasn't passive. It wasn't weakness or indecision. Patience was warfare. While the enemy threw traps clothed as blessings, shortcuts disguised as breakthroughs, and temptations dressed as destiny, your patience scoped them out one by one and shot them down before they could hit your spirit. You thought you were just waiting all this time, but you were being trained in divine timing, divine discipline, and divine discernment. You were learning how to move when instructed, not when pressured. You were learning not to react to noise, but to respond to truth. Many people ran into traps because they moved fast. They rushed into relationships, friendships, business deals, opportunities that glittered but didn't align with their soul. They grabbed what sparkled and called it fate. But you, chosen one, you waited, even when waiting felt like dying, even when the silence felt like punishment. Even when the delay felt like abandonment, you waited because something in your spirit whispered, "Not yet. Something's off. This isn't your door." And every time you obeyed that whisper, your patience fired another bullet at a trap meant to destroy you. You don't realize how many things you avoided just by not rushing. You don't know how many people tried to lure you, distract you, derail you, or hitch a ride on your destiny. You don't know how many opportunities were actually setups designed to drain you financially, emotionally, spiritually. You don't know how many fake friends would have buried you if you weren't discerning enough to stay still. You don't know how many heartbreaks you dodged because you refused to settle for someone who clapped for you only when it benefited them. You don't know how many spiritual attacks never reached you because your patience kept you out of the battlefield entirely. You think your patience cost you time. No, your patience bought you safety. It bought you clarity. It bought you alignment. It bought you authenticity. And most importantly, it bought you the right door instead of the convenient one. Chosen ones, patience was the sniper that shot down discouragement when it tried to invade your mind. Patience kept you grounded when everything around you screamed for panic. Patience kept you sane when life pushed you to the edge. Patience kept you clean when desperation tried to convince you to compromise. Patience kept your spirit intact when pressure tried to twist your identity. And while others interpreted your stillness as weakness, heaven saw it as mastery. You mastered restraint, you mastered timing, you mastered emotional intelligence, you mastered the art of not moving until the move was right. That's not weakness, that's divine power. That's the kind of power chosen ones carry. The loud may win the moment, but the patient win the war. And here's the part that stings your enemies the most. The very traps they set for you collapsed under their own weight because you refused to rush into them. You didn't fall for flattery. You didn't bow to pressure. You didn't crumble under loneliness. You didn't settle out of fear. Your patience exposed intentions. Your patience revealed character. Your patience separated the loyal from the lurking. Your patience forced truth to the surface. And while everyone thought you were missing opportunities, you were actually eliminating threats, slowly, quietly, precisely, just like a sniper. Now hear me clearly, chosen one, because this is where everything shifts. The doors that are about to open for you are not ordinary doors. They are doors that were kept hidden until you proved you wouldn't settle for anything lesser. These are doors that require a purified spirit, a matured mind, and a fortified backbone. These are doors that your old impatience would have disqualified you from. But now, Now you're ready. Because patience didn't just protect you, it transformed you. It trained you for the kind of blessings that don't come with fine print, manipulation, or compromise. You passed the test of patience, and that is one of the rarest exams a chosen one ever faces. Most break, most fold, most rush. Most sabotage themselves, trying to speed up what needed to unfold slowly. But you, chosen one, you mastered the silence. You mastered the waiting room. You mastered the pause. And because of that, you have neutralized every trap set against your destiny. Your patience wasn't a delay. It was a demolition. And now the path is clear, the traps are gone, and the doors, your real doors, are about to swing open so wide that every enemy, every doubter, every critic will have no choice but to watch you walk through them untouched. Number 10. You didn't just outgrow rooms. You erupted out of spaces that couldn't hold your future. My dear chosen ones, hear this with the weight it deserves. You didn't simply outgrow rooms. You erupted out of spaces that were never engineered to hold the magnitude of what God placed inside you. Let's call this what it is. Those rooms weren't small by accident. They were small by design, because they were meant to reveal whether you would shrink yourself to fit in or stand tall enough to crack the ceilings that were trying to cap your potential. You were never meant to blend. You were meant to burst. And while the world whispered, "Stay humble," what they really meant was, "Stay small." But God didn't craft you with that blueprint. You are not a seed meant for pots. You are a force meant for fields. And when chosen ones outgrow their environment, it doesn't happen quietly. It happens like an eruption, loud, disruptive, undeniable. Because destiny cannot be contained by comfort zones, and your future wasn't compatible with the furniture of the rooms you sat in. Listen closely, chosen ones. For a long time you thought you were failing because nothing in those rooms was expanding for you. You mistook restriction for rejection, when really it was redirection. God was tightening the walls not to suffocate you, but to make sure you outgrew what was beneath your calling. You didn't walk away from those rooms. They spit you out because your frequency was too high for their atmosphere. You started noticing it, the uneasiness, the tightness, the way conversations drained instead of fed you, the way opportunities felt recycled, the way your spirit felt like it was wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. That wasn't dissatisfaction. That was your destiny stretching. You weren't breaking down, you were breaking out. Every discomfort was a divine contraction, pushing you toward expansion. And while others tried to drag you back into their familiar corners, you were being called forward into unfamiliar territory designed for your next level. Understand this. Chosen ones don't fit in, because chosen ones weren't built to be furniture in someone else's narrative. You were built to be the architecture of your own. That's why doors started refusing you. That's why tables stopped inviting you. That's why rooms began to feel allergic to your presence. It wasn't because you lacked value. It was because your value exposed their stagnation. You didn't lose access. They lost alignment. And the moment your spirit realized it had outgrown those walls, the walls began to crack around you. People mistook it for attitude. They called you distant, changed, withdrawn. But you weren't withdrawing, you were awakening. You weren't arrogant, you were ascending. You weren't abandoning them, you were obeying God's elevation schedule. See, chosen ones don't outgrow rooms politely. You erupt. You outgrow mindsets, relationships, circles, and systems that once supported you. And the eruption is messy, loud, and misunderstood, because eruptions don't happen when you're ready. They happen when your destiny can't wait any longer. The pressure builds in silence. The tension increases behind closed doors. The frustration rises in the moments no one sees. And then, suddenly, you explode into alignment with your true capacity. That's why it shocked people when you finally left. They didn't see the pressure that had been building inside you for years. They didn't see the whispers from God telling you, "You can't stay here." They didn't see the dreams, the visions, the calling that wouldn't let you settle. They only saw the eruption, not the evolution. And here's the part that will make the enemy furious. The rooms you left will now start pretending they never needed you. But watch closely. Those same rooms will begin to crumble without your presence. Because chosen ones don't just take up space, they stabilize it. Your integrity, your discernment, your energy, your authenticity, they were pillars holding up places that thought they were supporting you. They never realized you were the foundation. And now that you've erupted into bigger territory, those past rooms will feel your absence like a missing heartbeat. Not because you were loud, but because your presence carried purpose they didn't recognize until it was gone. Let this settle deep in your spirit. Your eruption wasn't rebellion, it was resurrection. Your soul rose to a level that your old environment simply could not withstand. And now, God's chosen ones, the very rooms that once rejected you, will watch new doors swing open for you. Doors built with ceilings high enough for your growth, floors strong enough for your mission, and atmospheres breathable for your spirit. You didn't outgrow rooms, you were promoted beyond them. And the eruption you survived was your graduation into territory that can finally hold the weight of your calling. When you walk into this next season, remember this truth. Nothing you lost was meant to contain who you're becoming. You didn't just rise, you erupted. Because nothing about your future was ever meant to fit inside the small spaces that tried to hold you. And now the explosion of your transformation is the announcement that God's chosen ones are stepping into rooms built for their full stature. Doors opening because you passed the secret exam in the dark, and now your future can no longer be delayed. Number 11. Your consistency crushed generational patterns. Before you even knew you were fighting them. God's chosen ones, lean in because this one cuts deeper than the wound that brought you here. You think you were just surviving, just trying to keep your head above waters that generations before you drowned in. But what you didn't realize is that your consistency was not ordinary. It was ancestral warfare disguised as daily discipline. You weren't just waking up and choosing to do better. You were breaking chains forged decades before your name was ever spoken. You were undoing cycles stitched into family stories long before you were born. You were confronting ghosts that lived in the bloodline, habits inherited but never questioned, patterns passed down but never audited. And while others cracked under pressure, you, chosen one, kept showing up in ways that rattled the unseen world. You were not just fighting for yourself, you were fighting for every name connected to your bloodline, whether you realized it or not. You wonder why it felt so heavy, why your battles seemed larger than your body, why your depression felt older than your lifetime, why your heartbreak echoed like it was repeating history, why every step forward felt like it woke up something ancient and angry. Because it did. You weren't just dealing with your problems, you were wrestling with inherited fear, inherited silence, inherited survival patterns that taught your ancestors to shrink, to obey, to settle, to disappear when life got loud. Generational patterns don't dissolve politely, they fight back, they cling, they whisper, they tempt, they distort. They try to recycle themselves through you, and yet here you are, breaking cycles you were never taught how to break, surviving storms you were never trained for, rewriting scripts you didn't even know you were cast in. That is the mark of a chosen one, fighting wars you didn't start but still choosing to finish them. And here's the truth the enemy hoped you'd never uncover. Every time you stayed committed to growth, you ripped a brick out of the stronghold that held your bloodline hostage. Every time you told the truth instead of hiding, you shattered the legacy of silence. Every time you chose healing over numbness, you broke the cycle of emotional inheritance. Every time you forgave, you ended the recycling of bitterness. Every time you walked away from toxicity, you undid the blueprint of dysfunction. Every time you refused to give up, you crushed the generational belief that breakdown is destiny. That consistency wasn't small, it was seismic. It shook timelines. It altered spiritual architecture. It split history open and rewrote the ending. Chosen ones, most people think breaking generational patterns looks like dramatic moments, public declarations, big decisions, fireworks of transformation. But the exam you passed wasn't loud, it was brutally quiet. It was in the mornings you didn't quit, the nights you didn't spiral, the conversations you didn't pick, the habits you didn't repeat, the love you didn't abandon, the faith you didn't drop, the restraint you kept when chaos begged for a reaction, the boundaries you held even when your voice shook. Consistency is the weapon of the chosen. It doesn't roar, it rewires. It doesn't perform, it transforms. And that's what you've been doing without even understanding the magnitude of your own obedience. When the script says God's chosen ones, it's not poetic, it's prophetic. Chosen ones are always sent into families to close chapters that should have ended generations ago. You were not born into your bloodline randomly. You were planted there like a divine interruption, a reset button, a firewall, a breaker of cycles, even cycles that felt stitched to your identity. That's why you always felt different. That's why you couldn't tolerate the dysfunction others normalized. That's why your spirit rejected what your family accepted. That's why you felt like you never fit in with the patterns around you. You weren't designed to fit them. You were designed to break them. And that's why the next doors are opening. Not because you're lucky, not because you're perfect, not because you played the game prettier, but because you broke what was trying to break you. You stayed consistent in a battlefield you didn't even know existed. You held the line when previous generations dropped it. You carried emotional weight that wasn't even yours and still refused to collapse beneath it. You ended wars silently with choices that most people overlook. And heaven took notes. The silent cameras were rolling. The unseen world recorded every moment you stayed consistent when quitting would have been easier. So now, chosen one, this is your receipt. You didn't just pass a secret exam, you passed a generational one. You didn't just prove yourself, you proved your bloodline could evolve. You didn't just survive, you shifted history, and now the doors that once rejected your ancestors will open for you as if the hinges were waiting for your hands. You crushed generational patterns by simply refusing to stop becoming who you were meant to be. And now, God's chosen one, get ready, because you didn't just change your life. You changed the lineage that birthed you, and the breakthrough coming next carries the weight of every battle you never knew you were fighting. And now, chosen ones, here's the truth. Passing that secret exam wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Every sleepless night, every tear, every silent test has cleared the path for doors you never thought would open. You didn't just survive, you proved you're built for what's next. If this message hit you in the core, show it. Smash that like button, subscribe for more, and drop 77 in the comments so I know my real chosen ones are here. And don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone else who's ready for their doors to fly open.